Hey Merfolk fans, I'm Joe. Thanks very much for joining me today. If you'd like to support my channel, please check the link to my Patreon page above. So I'm just here with a quick deck tech kind of update on the mono blue list that I'm running after having switched off of blue-green Merfolk. One of the biggest reasons for my move away from blue-green was that I found the overall theory of the deck is that you're adding in new aggressive cards like Kumena Speaker and Merfolk Mistbinder to just get a critical mass of lords as quickly as possible and try to increase your sort of turn 4 win rate. Now the problem with that, there's a few problems, but the biggest problem is that Modern is a format full of spot removal. Lightning Bolt is making a huge comeback with the increased popularity of Mardu midrange, sort of Mardu Pyromancer. They run a whole bunch of Lightning Bolts. Then you've got the Hollow One deck is running a full playset of Lightning Bolts. And then, of course, you've got your Fatal Push, your Terminate in Grixis Death Shadow. You've got Kolaghan's Command in Grixis Death Shadow, and in Grixis Control, and in Mardu Pyromancer. Just tons and tons of spot removal, and the idea that we're going to win a lot of games just by establishing a board of 2 or 3 Island Walk Lords, maybe a Mistbinder, maybe a Kumena Speaker, it's just really not the way that games play out. Our Lords get removed. We're left with, 2/2 Kumena Speaker, and then what happens is you get to turns 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, and the best you can hope to top deck is, things like Kumena Speaker and maybe a Merfolk Branchwalker, these 2-drop 2/2s and 2/1s, really make the games that go past the first few turns feel pretty miserable, and that's the vast majority of games. So I, since switching back to mono blue, it just feels so wonderful having a playset of Master of Waves. I mean, as I was mentioning with Lightning Bolt getting more popular again, Master of Waves protection from red is becoming super relevant. Fatal Push and Collective Brutality, both pretty easy answers to Master of Waves. But it's not like every deck is packing playset of Fatal Push, a playset of Collective Brutality. Master of Waves protection from red is going to protect him from all of those spells that I mentioned earlier, protects him additionally from red board wipes like Anger of the Gods, Pyroclasm. So, as I mentioned, just has felt so good having a late game answer like Master of Waves as opposed to, worse top decks like these little guys over here. So really enjoying Master of Waves, full playset of Reejereys. That's another thing that blue-green had been cutting back on. Reejerey keeps our Lord count up at 12, and obviously has the combo with Harbinger. I've got a playset of all the Merfolk, basically the 7 main Merfolk, Master of Waves, Reejerey, the 2 Island Walk Lords, Harbinger, Silvergill, and Cursecatcher. For Spreading Seas, for AEther Vials, the flex slots are Kira. Again, format full of spot removal. Kira is going to do a great job. Also provides extra help against Affinity. We can block and trade with one of their flyers. If they have cranial plating, it's even better. Kira can get us a whole extra turn, basically, in that matchup. And in the other 2 spots, I've got 2 Spell Pierce. Now, this is something that playing blue-green for a few months actually brought back for me. I had been off of Spell Pierce for a really long time on mono blue, thinking that it was too narrow and that as the games go longer, it becomes kind of useless. But it's so flexible and defends so well against some of the really popular things in the format that can slow us down. Something like an Anger of the Gods on turn 3 or turn 4. Spell Pierce, excellent answer to that. If the opponent's tapping out for something like an Anger of the Gods and we can Spell Pierce it, that usually means we're going to win the game. If we can counter Liliana of the Veil, we can counter... Actually, Liliana the Last Hope is really worse against us, or more powerful against us than Liliana of the Veil. If we run out of Master of Waves with a couple of Spreading Seas, we've got a nice big army established. Liliana the Last Hope can just minus this guy and just get him off the board. Whereas Liliana of the Veil, we can just sack one of the elementals. So anyhow, there's a bunch of relevant Planeswalker threats in the format, and Spell Pierce is a solid answer to those. Even in the late game, sometimes what happens is the opponent will tap low to do something like activate a Celestial Colonnade to attack, leaving up maybe 4 mana still, but that means when they go for that Cryptic command, Spell Pierce is still live. So yeah, 2 Spell Pierce, 2 Kira, playsets of everything else. It's a very, very stock mono blue list, but it's not thoughtless. I'm not just running playsets because that's what people do. I'm running it because, I want the maximum amount of all of these cards, and the balance actually works really, really well. As you can see, this column of 2-drops is far and away the deepest. So we're going to want to keep AEther Vial on 2 most of the time, but then we still do have a significant number of 3-drops and 4-drops sort of rounding out that curve. If we do have multiple AEther Vials, it's going to be productive to put one on 2 and 3 and eventually 2 and 4 to help get those Master of Waves in. Getting over here to the mana base, a full playset of Cavern of Souls. Control is becoming more and more popular. On top of the traditional blue-white control, you now have a very popular Jeskai deck. You've got some Grixis control. All of these decks are running some number of Spell Snare, Mana Leak, Cryptic Command, Logic Knot, and as a tribal deck, there's really no reason in mono blue especially to not be running a playset of Cavern of Souls. The only things that we have in our deck that need straight up blue mana are Spell Pierce and Spreading Seas, and I guess you could say Kira. But then for Kira, AEther Vial helps, and for Spell Pierce and Spreading Seas, we only need one of these. We don't need double natural blue. So running 12 straight up blue sources between 11 islands and 1 Oboro, getting one of these in order to cast all of these sort of single blue casting cost non-creature spells, very easy to get online. So definitely run a full playset of Cavern of Souls in this metagame if you have access to the card. I know it's a little bit expensive, but it really does a ton of work. Moving on, we've got 11 islands, as I mentioned, and Oboro. I trimmed Minamo, I trimmed the Wanderwine hubs. In this metagame, Choke and Boil haven't existed for a really long time. Merfolk Mirror Match is around 1% right now of the metagame, so you should not be worried really about your quantity of basic islands. If anything, you should be concerned with having more rather than fewer. Which is to say that you want more rather than fewer. Blood Moon isn't really a threat for our deck, even if we do run some Wanderwine hubs, because we're always going to have a bunch of basic islands. But Blood Moon is in something between 10 and 20% of decks. You've got Mardu Pyromancer and Green-Red Ponza running it in the main deck. You've got some decks running it in the sideboard. With Blue-Green Merfolk, Blood Moon was a real threat. But back against Mono Blue, it's absolutely not, and I'm enjoying running 11 islands. Oboro's decent because it can filter our mana, with the Mutavault trick, so has some utility. Minamo, on the other hand, not really enough utility to warrant including it over just another basic island. Down at the bottom, we've got a playset of Mutavaults. That's another thing that Blue-Green Merfolk was lacking. This deck, Blue-Green, really needs access to blue and green mana on turns 1, 2, and 3. And a Mutavault can really throw a wrench into your plans. Whereas if you look at Mono Blue, Master of Waves has a whopping 3 generic mana in its casting cost. Reejerey has 2 generic in the casting cost, and then you've got Silvergill, Spreading Seas, and Kira, all with 1 generic mana, and then Negate in the sideboard, Dismember, Echoing Truth, Relic of Progenitus. A lot of these spells can be cast using mana from Mutavault, whereas the mana couldn't really be used effectively in the mono-green builds. So Mutavault is actually sort of a full value land in mono blue. It can contribute mana when you need it, and it can be a creature when you need it. And being able to run all 4 kicks our creature count up actually from 30 to 34. So super powerful, dodges, sorcery speed removal, like Collective Brutality and any sorcery speed board wipes. And let's see, what else? For Spreading Seas, for Aether Vials. Again, very, very stock mono blue list. And it just feels super smooth, very powerful. Looking at the sideboard very quickly, we've got 2 Dispels and 2 Negates, complementing the 2 main deck Spell Pierce. It's a nice counter magic suite to have against control decks and a deck like Grixis Death Shadow, more of kind of a mid-range control deck. Any mono blue Merfolk deck should be running a playset of Ceremonious Rejection. If you add up the meta shares of all the decks that this counterspell hits, it's something like 25% or more of the modern format. You've got all the Tron decks. That's Eldrazi Tron, Green Red Tron, Green Black Tron. You've got any Eldrazi deck. Again, Eldrazi Tron. You've got Black White Eldrazi. There's even an Eldrazi aggro deck that's been getting popular again with Eldrazi Mimic. And then, of course, any artifact deck. You've got Lantern getting super popular. It just won the Pro Tour. Ceremonious Rejection, obviously an amazing card against Lantern, and then our arch nemesis Affinity. So not only does it hit a huge percentage of the metagame, but it hits some of our worst matchups, like Affinity and Lantern. So absolutely no reason to not run a full playset of Ceremonious Rejections in the sideboard. Then you've got some creature removal, Dismember, 2 Echoing Truths, super flexible card. Can hit any non-land, can bounce an enchantment like Phyrexian Unlife, can bounce a ton of tokens, can bounce creatures, Tarmogoyfs. Any of the Delve creatures are actually awesome targets like Tasigur and Gurmag Angler because the opponent will have to re-delve to recast it. So Echoing Truth feeling really good. And then just 3 Relic of Progenitus. You guys know it hits a ton of decks. Some harder than others. Obviously, if you draw a turn 1 Relic against Living End, you're probably going to win. If you draw a turn 1 Relic against Dredge, you're probably going to win. But then you've got other decks, all the mid-range decks like Jund and Abzan and Mardu Pyromancer that try to generate graveyard value. This does an excellent job against those decks. You do want to always leave that 1 mana open, to be able to pop it in response to something like an Abrupt Decay or a Kolaghan's Command. It's a little bit of a blowout if you tap out and let them destroy your relic, so be careful with that. In those matchups, trading a bit of tempo in favor of, if you play a 2-drop like Spreading Seas or Silvergill, instead of tapping out for a 3-drop like Merrow Reejerey or Kira in order to leave up mana for relic, that's really strong because we're still playing 2-drops while controlling the opponent with relic. So yeah, that's it. That's my quick deck tech sort of update with my mono blue list. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions, thoughts, suggestions. And yeah, I'll go ahead and get to the friendly league that I played yesterday, I think it was. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll see you soon. Bye.